Welcome to the last day before spring break. So, I was thinking about what kind of giant mega project I can assign you over spring break, and then I was like, nah. You guys just finished Space Invaders. Enjoy. No homework. Okay. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll come up with something, but I'm not really planning on it. Okay. Well, look at all the time you could be studying. All that time's going to waste. Master's giving Dobby less stress. All right. So, yeah, nah. I was planning on having the next social issue in computer science go up, but we'll do that. We'll do that after we come back. Enjoy your spring break. It'll be fun. All right. So, we talked about racism in computer science last time. Always, not a fun topic to talk about, but an important one. And so a lot of students were asking, is the bias intentional, or is it, is it programmed in, or is it just picking up on things? And without talking about a specific concrete example, it's, impossible to say. And also, it involves mind reading, the programmers of a company. There's been sort of a variety of different reasons for these things. A lot of them, it just involves, people just not thinking about it, and so obviously not intentional in those cases, but at the same time, probably something they could have thought about if they had, had that on the radar a little bit, which is the reason why I gave the talk. It's like, if you guys become professional computer scientists, at least, in the back of your head, be like, let's see how this Tesla autopilot thing works on avoiding pedestrians of different skin colors. Let's try that out. Before we deploy it into the real world. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, especially with machine learning, it's kind of hard to say why it picks up something. Like the way the machine learning works is. Well, there's no one way. Again, it's a giant topic. But the way that, like let's say you're doing a neural net, you feed it a ton of data, and you feed it an input, and you say, categorize this. Approve the loan or not. That thing says, approve the loan, and you're like, correct. Approve the loan or not. Approve. Wrong. And every time it gets it right, you positively reinforce it, and every time you get it wrong, you negatively reinforce it. And one very simple way of training neural net is you score it. Like you have 10,000 mortgages called the ground truth that you've personally vetted, and are like, all right, these are correctly categorized. And if in those 10,000 people you've correctly categorized, black people don't get mortgages approved more often than white people, or Asian people, or Hispanic people, because again, it's not just black and white. Then the neural net can oftentimes pick up on that. And even though he didn't tell it to be racist, there's a lot of different ways that it can statistically derive that and be racist. Anyway, so, it's a good idea, again, just to look at it and try to make sure that your machine is kind of being fair. Okay, big thing in the news right now is the hashtag Stop AAPI Hate, which, after the horrible shootings in Atlanta, it's racism against Asians is finally kind of on the nation's radar, which is a good thing, not the racism, right? Like the fact that people are talking about it and stuff like that. That's probably a good thing. And it'll be interesting to see if it's still going to be socially acceptable to discriminate against Asians at the college level, right? It's the whole lawsuit against Harvard, right, which the judges keep citing against Asian people, is that it's okay to discriminate against Asian people at the academic level. You're far less likely to get into Harvard. 3 times less likely. 25% chance of an Asian getting in, 35% chance if you're white, given a certain set of scores, and then it's like 75% if you're Hispanic and 95% if you're black, and then two different judges in appeals courts ruled, yep, that's fine, it's okay. Number of Asian applicants have been going up. They have kind of only a little bit allowed more Asians in at Harvard, and so the allegation is that there is a quota. There's a racial quota at Harvard. What Harvard does is it consistently rates Asian people as being lower on social skills than people of other races, and judges said that was okay. That that Harvard is within its rights to discriminate against Asian people. So it's like, all right. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes, right? So, one of the in California we have a race blind admissions for the UC system. You heard about the mass shooting in Colorado in a supermarket? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I was talking specifically about the Atlanta shootings where they shot 2 white people and 6 Asian people. And then there's been kind of a string of assaults in Oakland, where, especially around Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year, that people have been robbing elderly Asian people because they know they're carrying lots of pocket money on them, red pockets, Hongbao. And so that's been kind of, I don't know if you guys have been hearing about that, but it's been kind of growing in momentum. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if anything changes. It's easy to do lip service after a tragedy. But it'll be interesting to see if, like, Harvard continues to, stick with its, policy of, yep. So, yeah, when Ward Connolly, the guy who proposed, and the people of California voted for race blind admissions in California, when he was doing it, one of the fellow regents of the University of California told him, he's like, we need to discriminate against Asians because they're boring. All they do is study. It's like, really, dude? Like, and so, I don't think that that would even be a bad thing, right? Like, you're a university, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah, it's like, this is a guy running the University of California. This is an ancient past. This is, I think, late 90s, when we moved to race blind admissions. And it's like, dude, like, this is, yeah. All right. So, we're going to continue our discussion of all matters political and social today. All right. So, you guys all know what framing is, right? So you have a farm. No, wait, no, it's farming. Framing is when you build the frame of a barn first. And many assaults have happened to older Asian people. Yeah. It's and how much national attention has that gotten? Probably not very much. I don't know. I mean, I heard about it, but I don't know. It's hard to say. So, framing, yes. No, not this kind of framing. Farming, no. No. A frame is a mental structure to handle the way that we view the world. Okay? And so, this is relevant both in our discussion of social issues and computer science, and if you're actually doing programming, like, you need to understand your mental frame. What assumptions do you have going into something? How are you viewing input to a program, for example? And in debate, online debate, if you can control the frame, you can oftentimes win the debate. right? So if you establish a mental schema for dealing with a problem, and your opponent accepts it, oftentimes it puts them at a huge disadvantage, right? And in debate, it can help you win the debate. In programming, though, like if you screw up your if you screw up the frame, like if you assume that nobody's ever gonna use a EKG paddle for fun, right? Then that can kill people, right? So whatever assumptions you bring to the table in computer science, you know, if your programs have real world impact, like I've said before, you know, I used to work in a place that we shared a building with a medical device manufacturer, and I never wanted to write programs for medical devices, you know, it's because I'm aware enough of myself that I know that I'd forget something, you know, like there'd be something that I'd forget and it would kill someone. I didn't want to kill people. I wanted to kill people in video games, but not in real life. So I worked doing virtual reality game programming, but had no desire to participate in the medical device manufacturing. Like a paradigm, yeah, that's one way of putting it. You know, there's a paradigm you kind of think about the world, and so yeah, like if you bring to medical device manufacturing that nobody will ever, you know, EKG somebody for fun, you know, you'll kill somebody. Or if you assume that, you know, power can't go out in the middle of, you know, the device being on. Like let's say that you've got a dialysis machine, and dialysis machines, you know, purify people's blood, kind of the way that your kidneys do, and your liver does too as well. Most of your kidneys. So dialysis machine is clearing waste from somebody's blood, and the power goes out. If that thing reboots, and when it reboots, and I don't know, it runs backwards or something, like you can kill somebody, right? You just assume, well, like I don't know, it's a hospital, it's going to have a backup like you will kill people, you know, if when you boot it up, it goes through this whole diagnostic, and it runs the motor backwards, and I don't know, like it sprays the person with acid. I don't know, it's part of the boot up process, who knows, you know, just things like that, and people don't even realize it, you know. It's like, you know, why would somebody be attached to the dialysis machine when it turns on? That doesn't make any, like, you don't even think about it, right? You don't even think about it. And that's the really scary thing, is that the things that you don't think about can kill people. And how do you think about the things you don't think about? How do you think about the things you don't think about? That's like a paradox. You know what I mean? And the only way you can learn to think about the things you don't think about is by taking critical thinking classes, or by programming enough that you've killed enough people, you know, that you're like, oh, okay, let's not do that, you know. Probably better to do the critical thinking class, you know, and to learn to look at your assumptions and be like, all right, I'm reading airspeed on an airplane. Why am I storing this in an unsigned integer? Unsigned integers can only hold 0 and positive numbers. What happens if the airspeed goes negative? You know, well, it can't go negative. Airplanes don't fly backwards. If you do get a negative airspeed reading, like there's a gust of wind that's really strong that, you know, knocks the airspeed reading negative, then if you use an unsigned integer, and you don't need to worry about what it is, it's kind of a first semester computer science programming class topic. But and if your number can only hold values from 0 to 4 billion, and you get a -1, what happens is it wraps around, it underflows, and it becomes 4.2 billion. And yeah, and so now your airspeed is 4.2 billion, at least according to the sensor. All sorts of problems will come about if you feed that into the system. And so yeah, just by assuming that airplanes can't go backwards, you can kill people. You know, error, reboot, the plane falls out of the sky. You know, you're not programming a vacuum or designing. Yeah, you're not. And so like every time you write a line of code, it's kind of like, all right, you know, how could this kill someone? Now, one of my favorite classes in grad school was called fault-tolerant computing. Fault-tolerant computing. Like, how do you make you control an airplane so it doesn't fall out of the sky? As it turns out, it's really hard. Because there's a lot of things that can break. You know what I mean? Like, let's say that everything's working right in the computer, and you send the pilot, hits a button, extend flaps. Okay. It'll send a command to 3 different pistons controlling the flaps. What if one of the wires is faulty and it gives the opposite command to one of the pistons? Well, then the plane is designed so that 2 of the pistons will overpower one of the pistons, and it'll have a physical voting system where it'll be a best 2 out of 3, and if any 2 of them go the same way, it'll override the third one and extend the flaps or retract the flaps. Right? And so all throughout a plane, redundancy is built in. It's one of the reasons why air travel is safer than driving a car. Everybody hears about the plane crashes because they're horrific, right? A plane crash is terrifying. Like Kobe, who died in a helicopter accident last year. It's horrifying. He's flying his daughter and their youth basketball team. Oh my gosh, dude, that's it's horribly tragic. And a car accident, which kills far more people by any measure, per capita or whatever. Mace, can you turn the light on? Thank you. The camera's been flashing. It's trying to adjust to the brightness levels. It's far more mundane. We're used to car accidents killing people and maiming people, and so the human mind doesn't worry about it as much. So yeah, the mental frame that you bring with you it's something you need to think about, right? And like I said, in programming or in just real life. And so there's Zen Buddhism, right? Zen Buddhism is the entire purpose of Zen Buddhism is to try to remove the filter, remove the mental filter that you have. Stop trying to impose what you think the world is like on the world, but actually to view the world as it is. And if you ever heard like Zen koans, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Have you guys ever heard that before? What is the sound of one hand clapping? If a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, doesn't make a sound, things like that. That's not really what a koan is about. A koan is not a riddle. It's not like a puzzle that you solve. It is a story designed to make you question the assumptions that you bring, to make you aware of the assumptions you bring, and so you can think about them, right? So I think car crashes will be big when self-driving cars crash, as it would be all AI's fault. Yeah, we're going to have a whole talk on that too. It's an interesting discussion. So for example, one of the phrases in Zen Buddhism is, if you see the Buddha, kill the Buddha. Right? I think this might actually be on one of the frames here. The slides here. But like, if you're a devout Buddhist and you hear, if you see the Buddha, kill the Buddha, like, what? What? I thought we're not supposed to be violent. I thought we're supposed to respect the Buddha. Like, what? And so it challenges that sort of, that frame that you have, that assumption that you have. And there's all sorts of interesting interpretations of that phrase, right? Like, I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and he said, if you can see the Buddha, it's not actually the Buddha, so strike it down, there's a lot of really interesting takes on that, on just that one phrase, but the point is to challenge, these assumptions that you bring to the table, the frames you bring to the table. So let me give you an example of this in debate, okay? Because if somebody accepts your frame in a debate, then the debate's like already 90% more. Okay, so let me show you how left-wing, and again, these are simplified greatly, and again, there's also middle-wing and center-wing people as well, and people that don't map easily into these concepts, but whatever, it makes for a simple table. So if you're talking about the abortion debate, right, there's pro-choice on one side and pro-life on the other side, and that's deliberate, right? That's deliberate. If you accept the debate is between people that are pro-choice and people that are anti-choice, like, who the hell would be anti-choice? You know what I mean? Like, if the abortion debate really was of can women do what they want with their bodies, then it would be a very the debate would be over, right? Because like yeah, I mean, why would you? I mean, there's probably some misogynists out there, but probably not actually that many. Say no, I can tell a woman what she can do with her body. However, the right wing people say no. It's about there's an actual different human life inside of the woman. It's not her body per se. There's a human life, and it's like after the kid's born, you can't just kill it because it's inconveniencing you. It's about life, and so the right wing people frame it as they're pro-life, and who can be opposed to life? Who wants to be part of the anti-life party, right? And so the abortion debate basically won't be resolved because they're debating two different things. The left-wing people are saying it's about choice, and the right-wing people are saying it's about life. Those aren't opposing stances. Those are two different stances, and they're both, framed very positively. We're supporting life. We're supporting choice. Okay, cool. Those aren't opposed stances. Those are two different stances, and that's why the abortion debate goes on, because and each side always tries to impose their frame on the debate, right? And so it's always interesting to me because if you listen to like newscasters and things like that, by the terminology they use, you can tell whether they're left or right wing. It's very interesting, right? Like especially if you hear like a broadcaster say like the pro-choice versus the anti-choice people. It's like the anti-choice people don't call themselves anti-choice. You know what I mean? And so. Or if they say pro-life versus the pro-death party, like okay, well that's a right-wing commentator, right? So the choice of terminology you use establishes the frame for the debate, and so you can see in most of these debates they don't accept the other side's frame, and so they just end up arguing and talking at cross purposes. Okay, so. So for healthcare, single payer healthcare, right? Single payer. Who wants to have multiple payers? Who wants to have complexity? It's simple. It's single payer, right? Simplifies everything. Get rid of the insurance people. Everybody hates medical insurance. Simplify it. There's just one payer. It's nice. It's easy. The single payer is not you either. It's the government. So it's free healthcare for all Americans. And, who can be opposed to that? And then the right wing are socialist healthcare, right? Like, look at Venezuela. Look at communist Russia. And so the frame is very different, right? This is on how many payers are there for the healthcare system. We're simplifying it, right? And this is like the Holodomor in Ukraine, when Stalin, forcibly starved millions of Ukrainian people to death, like these are two very different things indeed, and if you accept one of those frames, like if you accept the other side's frame, then you're going to be at a serious disadvantage because the right-wing approach is to try to saddle left-wing people with the very ugly history of communism over the past was it 100 years or so now, right? And the left-wing people are like, no, don't, I mean we're just simplifying things, right? Like nobody likes all the complexity of all the different layers of bureaucracy and things like that. Laws needing to be passed are called the Internet Freedom Act. When it does the opposite, yeah, don't go by the title of a bill. Politicians use that trick all the time. So and so voted against the Internet Freedom Act. Yeah, because it's going to regulate free speech online or something like that, right? They always give these really like who could argue against it titles, right? On a bill. They do that deliberately, and then if you vote against it, you get tarred and feathered. They voted against the Help American or Save Our Children Act, right? What was the one a couple of years ago? DACA. No. What was it? DACA. Was that the Dreamers? Yeah, that's the Dreamers. No, what was the one I was thinking of? SOPA. Yeah. SOPA is Stop Online Piracy Act. Okay. Who wants to support online piracy, right? And PIPA, the Protect IP Act. Um, and then there's like Save Our Children acts and things like that. Who doesn't want to save the children? You know what I mean? Like, no, I'm gonna vote to kill the children. You know, like who is, you know, what politician is going like, no, I don't want to save children. Like, nobody does that, right? And so it's all about controlling that frame in politics, right? Left wing, right wing, right? On immigration, right? Left wing always talks about you know, refugees, right? And right wing, like was it Donald Trump Jr. that said, "You wouldn't eat M&Ms if 1 out of 10 M&Ms was poisonous, would you?" Right? Like directly framing the issue as, you know, like danger, because that's if you look at broadly, again, speaking psychologically, right wing people are afraid of change, and left wing people want change, right? And so conservative means you want to preserve the status quo, and left wing means you want to change the status quo. Yeah, progressive, right, means you want to change the status quo. And so the right wing objection to things is like, all right, you want to change, that's cool, but how do you know the thing you're changing to isn't going to be worse, right? And so those are the, like, psychologically speaking, that's, you know, sort of the big high level difference, right? Undocumented workers versus illegal aliens, right? Like that's like an alien sounds like you got, you know, like aliens versus predator, you know, like it's scary, you know? It's illegal, and in the left wing, it's like they just forgot their documentation, man. You know, it's undocumented. You know, like they, you know, you go to your, oh man, I don't have my ID on me. You know, like very different. Like, do you guys see that? Like, it's a very different set of terminology, and this terminology is not accidental. They actually will distribute when you get elected to Congress. They will give you a handbook saying use these terms. If you are a Republican, you must use this term, because we're trying to present a unified front to use this set of terminology, and so you must memorize these terms and not use the other terms. You have to use these terms. Okay. So, you know, it's you can see it's very different, right? Very different set of terminology. Giving cover to Nazis, free speech, right? Who could be against free speech? Who could be for Nazis? You know. And so, like, you know, left-wing censorship these days is about trying to regulate dangerous speech on the internet. And so right-wing people these days have been saying, no, you know, it's free speech, natural right, you know, that kind of stuff. Dubiousness of, oddly enough, dubiousness towards corporations, whereas left-wing people want the corporations to do more to stop dangerous speech on the internet. Like I said before when we talked about corporate censorship, there's two very different reasons why politicians are upset about, you know, Facebook and Twitter and all the other avenues of Reddit and things like that, because the right-wing politicians want less censorship and the left-wing politicians want more censorship. But either way, they want something to change, you know. And so they're framed very differently. Drilling for oil versus energy exploration, right? So who could be against energy exploration? We're going on an adventure. Really, what are you going to find? Oil, you know, and versus you know, things that like invoke birds covered in oil and, you know, things like that, right? Public service, you know, if you're talking about working in the government, it's public service, whereas right wing is big government, right? Or if you talk about pharmaceutical industries, like the left wing says big pharma, right wing says, you know, private companies that are saving, you know, look at how much great, you know, work big pharma did for coronavirus, right? You know, look at how fast they turned out the vaccines. You know, it's amazing. And, you know, the left has been, you know, framing it as big pharma, you know, for years. Cold adventure for oil, bro. Yeah. So, again, this is a drastic oversimplification. There's a variety of opinions on both sides. I'm just saying, like, this, like, it's not actually even that big a simplification if you're talking about Congress people. Because here you go. Here's the list of words you need to use. Don't use the other team's words. Use your words. And so you'll have politicians arguing past each other all the time because they don't accept each other's frames deliberately. And so, so whatever frame you accept is going to essentially determine what your answer is. Like who's for, the exploitation of children? Like nobody, Who could be against choice, right? Who could be for Nazis? So, it's something you should really think about every time it comes to a social issue. Like I pay very close attention to the words being used, right? Like what I don't know what political topic is being discussed right now, right? There's how many years since that oil spill? Yeah, it doesn't matter. But the point is, like, when I listen to the news, I'm like paying attention to the terminology. You know what I mean? Paying attention to the way the news are portraying, the politicians portraying an issue. So there's two levels of filters on it. There's two levels of framing. The first is the way the politician is framing an issue, and the second is the way that it's reported, right? And so, I always try to listen for that and just be like, okay, all right, I see how they're trying to, set this up, right? So, these are both taken from my friends on Facebook, by the way. All the pictures you're going to see here are actual real things that my friends have posted on social media sites. So, which one of these do you think was posted by my left-wing friend, and which one do you think was posted by my right-wing friend? Everyone has an agenda, yeah. But the agenda translates into different frames, different ways of viewing the world. Like I said here, a frame is a way of simplifying a complicated issue, right? The world is a big, complicated place, and our brains can't embrace that complexity. It's very hard. Unless you get like a PhD in a subject, we usually have a very stripped down, very simplified model of an issue. And so what handle do we have on it? Is it about life or death? Is it about choice or anti-choice? Like, whatever that really simplified model is, that's what we carry with us. Because we don't have time to get a doctorate in every topic. We're not vampires, right? So, Captain America is from the right wing, you would think, right? Because it's got patriotic imagery on it. But this is from my left-wing friend. This is a Antifa supporting a person, in fact. And so he supports Antifa because he says anybody that Antifa is punching is by default a fascist. Because if Antifa is against fascists, then anybody they're against must be a fascist, right? The logic is impeccable. So, so this is actually from my left-wing friend. And my right-wing friend is criticizing the left's criticism of making everybody they don't like a Nazi, right? So these are almost in opposition to each other, right? Like this guy's saying, I want you to punch Nazis. And then the guy on the right is like, yeah, just because you don't like somebody doesn't make them a Nazi. You know what I mean? Like, you should probably spend more time trying to figure out if somebody is actually a Nazi before you punch him, right? There was a woman at Berkeley that was wearing a red hat that got socked, right? Or maybe it was a guy that was wearing a red hat at Berkeley and just got knocked out. Why? Because they thought it was a MAGA hat, right? So, the logic is, if you're wearing a MAGA hat, you support Trump, and Trump is a Nazi, and so it's okay to punch him because he's supporting Nazis. And so if you're Antifa, and then hit a person in a red hat, and then afterwards, oh, sorry, didn't see it. So yeah, and so that would be oppositional views on the same matter, right? Like for against Antifa. Again, which one of these portrays Antifa in a good frame? Which one of them portrays them possibly in a negative frame? What is the symbology going on the one on the left? Let's ask that. Pretty funny book cover. It's not a real book cover, by the way. But Little Golden Books, have never done a book called Everyone I Don't Like Is Others. Looks pretty authentic though. It's a good Photoshop job. So what is this? What is the symbolism? Symbolism is a big part of the frame too. Using symbols. Symbols are simplified representations of a concept, that carry meaning. What is the Antifa guy on the left holding in his hand? Can you guys see that? Does that come through? Holding a slingshot. Okay. So what famous character killed Goliath with a slingshot? David and Goliath reference. Yeah. Antifa people in real life, I've never seen use a slingshot. And again, this is an issue where I've spent lots of hours actually watching primary footage. I don't care about watching reporting on a topic, because if you're going to be watching a Fox News report on Antifa, it's going to be negative. And if you're going to be watching, I don't know, CNN, they're probably going to be, to a certain degree, sympathetic. So I spent hours watching primary footage, just raw and cut footage, just trying to figure out what's going on. Never saw one use a slingshot. So what frame is trying to be created here? Bart Simpson? Could be. Yeah. So what does the symbology mean here? Righteous underdog, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, small guy, little guy standing up to, the oppressor, right? And then over here, this is posted by a right-wing friend of mine, and basically, is trying to frame them as cop killers, right? I don't think they've ever killed a cop that I'm aware of. I could be wrong. I'd have to look into it. I don't recall any off the top of my head. Okay, but the frame here, I mean, that's a real photo. That's not photoshopped, right? And so, again, you can cherry pick individual. In every group, you can find loons. You can find people that are on the fringes of things, and I don't know if that's fringe or not. Again, but he's like, cherry pick, boom, let's make him look bad. Screenshot, put it up on Facebook. Right? So here they're the righteous underdogs. Here they're dangerous anarchists. Here we have again 2 shots. Heading to Berkeley to disrupt the neo-Nazi white supremacist circle jerk today. Nervous AF, but determined to bring back 100 Nazi scalps. So so-and-so is there now and can help comrade. Respect, stay safe, be careful. And they ass. Can you bring back 100 white people's dreads while you're at it? Go get them. And so, again, heroic underdog. Go cut off 100 white people's dreads. And here you have again portrayal of the group as unflattering, right? So the all white men are terrorists, right? So you can see the difference of portrayal, right, in the media or on social media. So in politics and public affairs, if you're ever going to deal with the public, you need to understand this, right? Like, you almost never even acknowledge the frames of the other side. If if you're doing if you're giving a speech, don't accept the other team's frame. For example, the Democrats are trying to frame Richard Nixon after the Watergate affair as a crook, right? There was no actual evidence, I think, that Richard Nixon knew about Watergate. There is the famous tape that got erased, right? That purportedly, people think, but they don't know, but they think, had audio evidence that Nixon, knew in advance and ordered the break-in and covered it up, right? But as it was, they were just kind of accusing him of being a crook. Wasn't the Watergate, or was it some other issue? I think it was the Watergate on that one. I'm not. And so then Richard Nixon goes on to TV and says, a lot of people are wondering if I'm a crook. I just want you to know, I'm not a crook. And so what he did was he accepted the frame of the other side. And so rather than, it was Watergate. Okay. You guys don't know what Watergate was. the Republican dirty tricks team broke into a psychologist's office to steal files on opponents of the Republican Party so they get blackmail on them, right? And so they got caught, and so there's a big scandal outrage, as you can imagine. And the trouble is that Richard Nixon accepted the frame. Am I a crook? Am I not a crook? So everyone starts debating. Well, do you think he's a crook? Do you think he's not a crook? Let's split the difference and say he's half a crook. Did the other side get caught? The people breaking into Watergate did get caught, right? And so, he accepted the frame and then very promptly got drummed out of office. Ronald Reagan. They were trying to frame Ronald Reagan. At the time, he was the oldest person to run for presidential office. And so there was a constant drumbeat from his opponent. I think it was Mondale in that election. That he's too old. Like, if there was a nuclear war, would you want this old guy like running the country, or do you want young, peppy, 60-year-old Walter Mondale? And so in the debate, the moderator asked Reagan, I guess I can just play it for you. Huh?
You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were retired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances? None at all.
Okay, so the question, so the reporter starts by saying there's reports from your team that you've been tired. Second point, JFK had to go multiple days without sleep. The Cuban Missile Crisis, obviously JFK was, I think, maybe the youngest president, one of the youngest presidents ever. And is there any doubt in your mind? So what trick was that? Is there any doubt in your mind? We talked about this about 2 weeks ago.
Any doubt in your mind?
Is there any doubt? What is that? All or nothing? Partly. Yeah, partly. I mean, honestly, everybody's going to have some doubt about something, right? But what is any? It's to set up a straw man. Yeah, because if he answers it truthfully and says yes, then doesn't get elected, right? And so in order to negate it, Reagan has to say not at all, right? Complete negation, all or nothing, right? This is a quantifier. Do you guys remember that? Is there any doubt? Is there 1% or above doubt in your mind, right? Does there exist? Backwards E, right? Backwards E. Does there exist any doubt in your mind about your age?
That you would be able to function in such circumstances? None at all.
Right? So we got an all or nothing from Reagan. No, 0%. Now watch how he reframes it, right? So he starts off by just rejecting the question, which he answered it, which to his credit, like most politicians don't. Most politicians these days don't actually answer questions directed at them, because to even answer it is to acknowledge the other frame existing. But watch how he reframes the question. You guys ready? You guys still here? YouTube might copyright strike me, so make sure you guys watch this live if you can. All right, watch how he reframes it.
Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
So, how do you flip it? You made the issue something else. No, he kept the issue on age, but he reversed it, right? So he said, what? He said he's not going to make age an issue, and you're expecting that to be like, well, he doesn't want it to be an issue because he's old, right? But that's not the reversal. Like if you just say, hey, I just don't want to talk about my age, that's a very weak response. I don't want to talk about my age. Now everyone wants to talk about your age, you know. How did he flip it? How did he flip the frame? And if you look at Mondale's face in that, like he's just like, zing. Right? He called his opponent youth and inexperience. Yeah. So it's not about my age, it's about my opponent's youth and inexperience. Right? And considering Mondale is a pretty old dude with lots of experience, it's just kind of funny. Right? And so you can click on these links here. Clinton framed welfare reform in terms of poor people being lazy, right? We need to get lazy people off welfare. Reagan has a number of good quotes on communism as well, how to frame communism, things like that. So the downside, though, is that they limit your ability to see the truth. If you've accepted a frame that, like, this is the way the world is, every bit of information you process is going to come in through those frames, right? If you see everything in America as being wrong, right? Even if there's something nice about America, you're going to discard it as an outlier, right? But if anything that comes in that is wrong about America, you're like, see, confirms my bias, right? And so it's really important to try to observe your own frames that you impose on reality instead of seeing reality as the way it is. There it is. You see the Buddha kill the Buddha. So, for example, I worked with a nonprofit. I do grant writing as kind of a side business, and I wrote a grant for a nonprofit organization that, among other things, works with male victims of domestic violence. Male victims of domestic violence, which is something that a lot of people have never heard of, right? In fact, if you look at the laws in a lot of states, it says he, right? When it talks about defining domestic violence, it'll say when a man strikes a woman and they're married or something like that, you know? And so a woman could literally hit a dude or shank him, and it's not against the law, because the law says when a man strikes a woman. But if a woman stabs a dude with a fork, it's not domestic violence, because it's gendered, right? And so it's literally impossible in those states for a woman to commit domestic violence. But if you look at people think it's like zero, like that just doesn't happen, right? And there's also male-on-male domestic violence as well, of course. And so about 15% of women have been assaulted by a partner, and 7% of men, right? It's more common for a man to assault a woman than the other way around, for sure. But it's not zero. And if you look at the number of shelters, there's obviously women-only shelters. There are no male-only shelters, or if there are, there's like one, you know? And even if you ask, like, hey, are there any places where my buddy who just got assaulted by his wife can go? Is there a battered men's shelter? This is in, the San Francisco Bay Area, which is one of the most progressive, places on the planet. And look at the responses that he gets, right? Hey, my friend got beat up by his wife. Is there a place where we can go? And San Francisco, California. Is there such a thing? A friend of mine, this is the guy asking the question. Is there such a thing? A friend of mine is seeking refuge from his large and angry wife. Any help would be appreciated. Thanks. What's good for the geese is always good for the gander. Oh, Sheila. Oh, Sheila. Really? Dude's getting domestically abused and you're like mocking it? There's nothing sadder than a man who's scared of his wife. Is this about your fat wife again, Dave? Did you refuse to have sex with her again? Well, Manny, my friend's wife is very. This is Dave again. My friend's wife is a very scary woman. You would probably be scared of her too. Go to a friend's house and crash for a few days. Meanwhile, call the cops or something. Okay, I just hope she doesn't find him at the friend's house. Yikes. Dang, is she that off the rocker? What is it, medical? Because then maybe I'll have sympathy. Just angry mostly, not sure why. Sounds like a pretty serious mental disorder. That's be honest, Dave. Is this really about you? Ha ha ha. Gimme Shelter. You know, obviously the Rolling Stones song. Like, really? You know, could you imagine like a woman's like, hey, I just got beaten up by my husband. Can you recommend a shelter to me? And people are like, haha, Gimme Shelter, Rolling Stones. Come on, be honest. You know, like, holy smokes, dude. You know, and this is San Francisco. That's supposed to be on the, you know, the super progressive side of everything. I can't say I've ever seen a battered men's shelter or brand spanking new men's shelter either. Weren't these dismantled after World War II? Dave, show us a picture of her scary. It's sad you're still with that heifer, Davey. You and Becky could have been so beautiful together. Mocking one after another, you know? And I was like, what the hell, dude? You know? And so I wrote a grant to help make a, basically to help this group that assists men who are victims of domestic violence. You know, and people act like it's a joke, you know, and it's not, you know? Like, so in a study in Ireland, there's a Wikipedia page here on domestic violence against men you can read if you want. Wikipedia's take on it. 41% of the time when there's when a woman phones the police and says, "Hey, we're having a domestic violence thing here," 41% of the time the police show up and kick the man out, and he is threatened with arrest or arrested 28% of the time. When a man called the police saying, "Hey, my wife is domestically violencing me with a knife or whatever," 0% of the time the woman is ordered out, and 0% of the time arrested. Right? Not a single case out of the hundreds of calls to the police. "Hey, my wife's got a knife. She's coming at me." 0% of the time was she ordered out. 0% of the time arrested. Right? And that was one study that was in Dublin, I believe. In America, it's maybe slightly better. It's like 1%, you know, or something like that. Like, it's not great, you know. But that one study is very interesting because literally not a single case ever do the police intervene to protect a man, but with a woman, quite often, right? And 12% of the time, when the man called the police saying, "Hey, I'm being domestically violated," he got arrested. Can you imagine? Help. And then you go to jail, right? And one of my students a couple of years ago said, "Yeah, that happened to me." Sorry, dude. You know, it's not. You know, I worked with this group for a while, and it's a jacked up situation. You know, and so the reason why people are mocking this, the reason why the police aren't arresting people, the reason why the law says he commits violence on she, is because that's our mental frame. When you think of domestic abuse, and it is more common that way, when you think of domestic abuse, you think of a guy beating up his wife, right? Gets drunk, comes home, you know, and if that's the way that you perceive reality, when something happens that doesn't conform to the reality, like you saw on Yelp in San Francisco, these people should have sympathy for a guy. He's being abused. You know, ha ha ha. Gimme Shelter, Rolling Stones, yeah, baby. You know, oh, it's about you, Dave, isn't it? That fat cow, huh? You know, and that's how people, and they just it gets rejected. You saw not a single person on there had like, you know, the best was like, I don't know, I've never heard of one, stay at a friend's house or something. You know, that was like the most sympathetic, like, or I don't know, just, yeah, it's something. You know, literally every person on that page, you know, was just like rejecting the fact that it was even happening. You know, and now put those people in power in politics and have them write the laws. You know, and that's why you got laws that, and it's changing, by the way. It's getting better. But that's why you have laws that like won't even allow a woman, if she stabs a guy, it won't even be domestic violence because the law is written specifically he versus she, right? So where's the equality? Where's the sympathy, right? You know, I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, we talk about, like, most people have a good nature, and most people would sympathize with a guy that gets stabbed, right? And you know, if you knew them and they told you the story, you're like, oh man, that's messed up. Like, most people have that, you know, right wing, left wing, it doesn't matter. Like, in general, we want good things for other people, you know? But when things don't match our frame, then you can see the results of it, you know? Police show up, domestic violence dispute, guy's the problem, I'm going to arrest him. I know he said that he got stabbed, but in domestic violence, it's always the guy, so I'm going to arrest him, you know? 1 out of, you know, 6, 7, 8, 1 out of 8 times, yeah, they arrest the guy who was getting abused. If a man even touches a woman, straight to jail. Yeah, yeah. The guy, his wife was blocking him from leaving the house. He's like, they're having a fight. I need to get out of here, and she didn't. So he picked her up, moved her out of the way, and left. And she's like, that's assault, and he got arrested for it. Right? She was trapping him in the house, you know, and he just wanted to leave, you know, goes to jail. So, yeah. Sorry for being a downer on this, but like, that's 100%, in my opinion, the result of a mental frame. We have a very strong mental frame that has been embodied in all sorts of movies and TV shows and, you know, pamphlets and all this stuff. And, you know, when I worked, you know, and I'm not any different, you know, I never really considered it before I started working with this group. And then I went, oh, damn, yeah, that's horrible. Holy smokes. You know, like, you know, I'm not saying I'm any better. You know, I'm a human too, unlike Mark Zuckerberg. Right? So, you know, shelter services, women, 150,000 people get to go to shelters. Children, 135,000 get to go to shelters. Pets, 161,000 pets get to go to shelters. Men, 1,000. Right? So, you know, if you're talking about, like what we talked about last time, disparate impact of races, things like that. Look at the disparate effect of what services are available for people. You know, men are half as likely to be abused as women. That's very true. But look at this: 150,000 women get to go to shelters, 1,000 men. 150 times the ratio, right? The actual violence rate is 2 to 1. The services provided is 150 to 1. Disparate impact, right? And why are people upset about it? Because they've never heard of it. It's just, you know, I don't know. Get a hotel room or something. I don't know. Go to a friend's house or something. You know? Yeah, more pets get shelter than men, right? You know, what is it called? Women, WIC, women, infants, and children. In other words, you know, social services for everybody but men, right? That's the name of the agency, right? Well, yeah. It's the California Women, Infants, and Children's Program, right? Who does that leave out? Everybody but men, right? And it's not like I'm trying to say you should go out and become a men's right activist or something, but you know, when I worked with this agency, it's just like, yeah, okay, it sucks. You know, and I think right-wing people would say, yeah, that sucks. And left-wing people would say, yeah, that sucks. You know, but why is it not an issue? Why are people not protesting in the streets about it? Because just, you know, it's the mental frame is that domestic abuse is always man on woman, you know. So, I mean, the guy that I worked with, you know, he had been the victim of domestic violence himself. You know. So, yeah, sorry for being a downer, but, like, you know, it's, after I worked with them, I was like, oh, wow, you know, that's a jacked up situation, you know. So, Yeah, and so basically, if you're going to be working in politics, you want to use the frames, right? It, politicians always try to frame things positively towards themselves. Right? And so one way that you can avoid this, one way that you can, you know, college is and that's why I'm glad you guys are taking this class. College is where you guys should go to learn to think. That's the phrase. College is where you go to learn to think, and that's why this class is so important. And so if you want to see what frames you have on, read news and opinions and editorials from people that are radically opposed to your own, right? Radically opposed to your own. If you're in favor of gun control, read what the NRA puts out on an issue, or I don't know, some right wing group, say what they have to say on gun control. If you are opposed to gun control, read what the proponents of gun control say. I'm not saying you should adopt their ideas. I'm just saying just read them, and just be aware of the other side, and what they're thinking and why. Don't listen to the caricatures and straw man that you get from sympathetic media. Let's actually try to understand why they believe the way they understand. Now, a lot of times you'll find out, they're coming at this from a good hearted perspective. You can still disagree with them, right? Still disagree with them, but you'll understand, like, these people want what's best for the world, just like me, So, it's like, who could possibly be opposed to minimum wage laws, right? Well, like I told you guys last time, minimum wage laws were, and to a certain degree still are, they give cover to racists, because racists don't get punished, right? Like on Long Island back in the day, white workers were making 10, blacks were undercutting them. So blacks were getting all this job. And so they imposed minimum wage laws so that there was no benefit, there was no penalty, right, for being racist. Because as it was, if you were racist, you had to pay twice as much for labor, your company would go out of business. And so in order to be able to stay racist, they passed the minimum wage law, which allowed people to be racist without penalty, right? And so, but nowadays, like, who could be opposed to minimum wage? It's like, and if you've never even heard an argument from the other side, it's like, I see. So, yeah, okay, I have to think about this now. Most of the big things we're debating in society, you actually have to think about it, right? Like there's complications and a lot of factors you haven't thought about and stuff like that. So, but the point here is that if you see the viewpoint of people that are radically opposed to your own, it helps reveal your own glasses. It helps you reveal the glasses you have over your eyes, right? You're like, I see what I'm bringing to the table, okay, right? And then I'm not even saying you have to accept them. I don't even, not at all. It's just be aware of your own frame, And also, oftentimes when you understand the other person's frame, helps you be a little more friendly, like, I see where you're coming from. So rather than being all oppositional, you're like, okay, so, all right. Yeah, I disagree with what you're saying, but I see you're trying to help people, so, let's find some common ground. And I can usually find, areas where, like, people very right-wing, very left-wing, both agree, like, it would be nice, wouldn't it, if, homeless people had food and shelter? Yeah, it would be, right? The approaches differ, right? The approaches differ on how to resolve it, right? But, right-wing people aren't like, just shoot them, they get caricatured that way, and left-wing people are like, caricatured as like, give them free drugs, and just, but if you talk to them, like, both of them are like, I want to help them somehow, but I don't want to help them in a way that'll harm them, and so, if you talk to people with radically different things, a lot of times you'll find out their heart's in the right place, it's just their approach to solving it's different, and then maybe you can hash something out. I don't know. And again, it's my favorite fallacy that I do is the fallacy of the middle, because I usually find you can find some common ground between people, like, but, that doesn't mean the middle's right either. It's just like, I just think that if you talk to people with good natures, you'll find out that they agree on the big principles. It's just the implementation that they usually differ on. So that's it for today, guys. Have a wonderful spring break. Sorry for ending on a downbeat like that, but that was that was something that I didn't know about either until I worked with this nonprofit. So, there's no, yeah. I'll just not give you guys anything over spring break. Just enjoy yourselves. We'll come back and we'll pick up a little bit more social issues. I'll read it. I'll look over your Scratch, Space Invaders and stuff like that. Hopefully have some fun with it. And see you guys in 2 Mondays. Okay? See ya.